morning, everyone. Welcome to another Goal Intentions. Oh my goodness, to reflect on last week's discussion, we had Carla McGregor on here. And it was just so refreshing to hear a perspective from an occupational therapist, a person who is in and out of the public school system, who seems to have all these fresh ideas and understanding of how our children could progress, particularly when it comes to their academics, but also with any extracurricular activity. And we just seem to be on the same wavelength. And it's something that I've been discussing all along with the need of having our children engage in activities so that we can stimulate them and help them to broaden their perspectives about what the future holds. And interestingly, this week, the mayor came out with a new initiative where there'll be summer rising. So they're looking at a 12-month academic and enrichment program where there wouldn't be a pause necessarily or a summer break, if you will, for students in the public school system. So they plan on launching this with a few schools. I knew they were focusing on one in the Bronx, and Phipps Houses or Phipps organization will be spearheading a number of those activities that would allow for children during the summer months to get enrichment as well as some academic uh, uh, kind of, I guess, thriving in a way that they can learn math, science, English with a twist. And I know some people might raise their brows and say, wait a minute, why am I going to send my child to school for 12 months out of the year? That doesn't seem to make much sense to me. Like, they need a break. We need to go on vacation. But quite frankly, it might be helpful, particularly after these 2 years of pause, where children have been working from home. Some have not been doing very well academically. Some thrived, but there are others who needed that social emotional kind of learning, that interaction with other people. And that was missing for well over 2 years. So here we are with an opportunity to actually have our children re-engage, be reintroduced to social interactions in a positive way. And I'm really excited to see exactly how that materializes, because that would actually mean that children not only will be getting into math and science and technology, looking at STEAM and STEM, it would also mean that they can get to tour the museums throughout the city. They're able to, see what other communities look like, what other cultures experience. If you watch West Side Story, you'll see the beginning of how the El Barrio actually was formed as because of turf wars. We don't have to experience that anymore. We can actually hop on the train and go to different parts of New York City and really understand the riches and enjoy all the value that it brings as being a New York City resident. So I'm really excited about, the cultural affairs that will occur during the summer. But today, I got my longtime friend on here, right? You all know I got my long time friends coming through. And today we have Carrie Reed, who is here today. She's going to grace the stage with her presence and her knowledge. We've known each other since Wingate. Yeah, another Wingate person. And she's done some phenomenal things. She's been a mentor to me. If she doesn't realize it, but she's been a mentor to me in so many ways. We've talked to each other on so many levels, and it was by happenstance. It wasn't that we were best buddies in Wingate. It's just that we saw the evolution and growth and the spirit within, and reached out to each other at times that we didn't expect. And I have to say that I really adore this person who is coming on stage today. Everyone, please welcome Carrie Reed Brown. Hi, Carrie.
Everyone. Hi. I am so excited to be here. First and foremost, congratulations. In your opening monologue, I was like, yes. Let the kids slid in 2 years. Let them get all of that stuff. I was like, yes. So I'm loving it. I love the setup. I love everything. This is going to be amazing. You notice that I'm well excited.
I know.
So I'm excited. I'll let you do your thing.
I know. We're doing this together, girl.
Yes.
Together. Please share the live. Thank you, Chad, so much for tuning in every week. Amanda, hello. How are you? So yeah, let's get started. We met in high school, Wingate High School.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how. It was one of those relationships where, again, we kind of intertwine in between different social circles, because we were in separate programs. You were, I think, doing business or law, and I was in the
Urban
med.
Marshall.
Right. But it's interesting that I think the parties is what maybe
Yeah.
drew.
Yeah, in Wingate, you know people because you go to the parties. That's it. Oh, I see you at the party, bogling out to the party, you know. But I think that's the beauty of Wingate. And when people hear about Wingate, they don't necessarily have positive things. But my experience at Wingate, I think of it as a privilege.
Mhm.
And I know we're gonna get into that, but Wingate created so many beautiful blossoms that or flowers or now trees in my life. And so it's what we can do about it. Ain't no party like a Wingate party. The
None at
Wingate
all.
party never stopped. So
Never, ever, ever stops. And to me, like we have most of the top DJs out there. Chad, no disrespect, but we got Rage Kalanji, we have Kenneth, we have Exquisite Nuclear
mhm,
with Bees and Chippy Striker and all of them. We got quite a few people. Quest,
mhm,
he and doing his thing with Megadon. I mean, we have quite a few people who has turned out to be phenomenal in the music
yep,
industry, in the underground music talent. So it's like really exciting that years ago we went to those parties as a place to escape from our regular daily whatever,
yeah,
and now it's like those hobbies, if you will, became something that many of our peers use as passive income.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the Caribbean culture out there, do like a hustle, and you build on that. Like you get really good.
Hmm.
Whether it was the cafeteria party or the party on East 31st or the party on
On
someplace else.
Rutland Road.
Rutland, or Clarkson or wherever it was, it was a ripe ground for them to practice and have support. Their internal friends kind of say, "All right, we'll come at the next party," and support the thing. So it's one of those trees that you get from Wingate. It was a little flower back then, but now it's like a full bloom tree that we can just pick so many really ripe fruits of lessons about, how we thrived in those early 90s coming to a new country. So,
Hmm. So tell us about you coming to a new country, because you are from Jamaica, right?
yes,
So tell us about your journey, coming to Brooklyn, and how did you manage to end up at Wingate?
listen. So, I have so many funny stories. So, came to Brooklyn. I probably I thought I heard I was supposed to end up in Queens. Thank God, me not Brooklyn. No disrespect to Queens people, but Brooklyn just has a whole different life. So back in the day, my uncle went to Wingate when Wingate was not predominantly black or anything like that. But he wanted me to go to another high school. But when you just come from the Caribbean, you're going to the zone school, and that was Wingate. And so I got into Wingate, and then I fought with them to not put me back a grade, because that's what they was doing to us back in the
Mhm.
day, straight from the
Right.
Caribbean.
Mhm.
And then I got in, and I remember my first class that I went to, it was Mr. Goldstein's health class. And I can't like I'm seeing his face, but I remember he had another brother, Garfield. Garfield is in the class. He's like, "What's up, man? I'm from Jamaica. You know where that is?" And I was like cackling, like I just came from Jamaica. And that's kind of when I know it's like, okay, this place is different. The kids were walking around the hallway singing dancehall songs. And I mean, that is a stark departure coming from Jamaica, where you have to speak properly in school. There was no patois, and you walked in, two abreast. There was, in Wingate, you're like juggling like this through the hallway. It was just a different vibe. So I had no choice. I came with my mom and my brother, started Wingate, and it was very clear that, this was going to be a very different learning experience. Garfield telling me that he's Jamaican and asking me if I know where Jamaica is. And then understanding in the circle building, this was, the Jamaica Avenue. I was like, Jamaica Avenue in the school? What is this? So it was just, that experience really propelled me in ways like people's like, oh, you went to Wingate, but the teachers who were predominantly West Indian, I mean, they were amazing. They gave me warning. They said, listen, I'm not going to call his name, but he was like, listen, don't come here and farm fool like the rest of them. Focus on your schoolwork. Okay. And I had a couple of teachers who made sure that I stayed grounded and not get
Mhm.
lost in the culture. And then at the same time, going to class and know that I was going to have Mr. Blaze, who was Haitian, teaching me Spanish. It was just like all these different things that just made it such a rich experience. One of the things that I talked about on the podcast is that when you come to New York from whichever Caribbean country you come from, all you know is Jamaicans, Guyanese, Trinis. But when you came to Wingate, oh my gosh, you gonna have some Grenadian friends, some Guyanese friends, some Trini friends. You're gonna have Haitian friends. You're gonna have friends all over, and that adds to the tapestry or the vibrancy of your life, right? Because now you're learning about different cultures, and that was Wingate. Where else would I learn moot court and mock trial? Big up to Monty, you know. So stop me whenever. I mean, I could go on and on, but Wingate was really a seed that helped me to be here. So even miss the music class, I remember there was an assignment where the music teacher said you had to do like a PSA in the
Mhm.
music class. That was an assignment, and that was my first ever recording, and I loved it. And I
Mhm.
reflect to that moment when I think of people asking me about doing a podcast. I was like, that was the first moment where I was like, I like this. I like recording my voice. And it was an assignment from, I can't remember the music teacher. It was this tall guy. He was a little bigger.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
Mr. Miller.
Mr. Miller, yes.
Yes. I was in his music class, and that was one of the assignments. And I just remembered, like, I like this. But,
Mhm.
in 19, whatever that was, podcast wasn't a thing, and I wasn't thinking about radio. Um, but just so many rich experiences. I
Yeah.
see everybody saying hi. Hi,
Yes,
Amanda.
we're all
I
saying hello. And you're right because I when I came from St. Croix, I was in the band. I played the bass clarinet and the clarinet, and it was one of those hitting gems at Wingate. Wingate actually had a band. They had this whole music program, and I played in the band for a short spell until I got into drama, and then drama is where it like took off because I said, "Oh my gosh, it's like all this music and the acting and whatnot." And I am no actress, but those are the things that actually give me that sense of peace,
Yeah.
where I can escape, and take on. And a part of literature also, because you find yourself, in a position where, okay, I know I'm smart, I know I'm passing my classes, I'm in honors classes, for crying out loud, but it's boring. How can this be invigorating? How can I make it exciting? And drama did that for me, where I was able to, not think about any stressors or worries that were really going on in our lives at the time, to try
Mhm.
to meet our parents' standards and society standards at that particular time. And of course, there was this whole situation back then where teenage pregnancy was a thing, right? It's something that I think everyone within my age group, we were born within that year, our parents were very afraid that we were going to become a statistic.
Mhm.
And it was like the thing that I dreaded the most, but then I fell in love.
Mhm.
And it's like, oh, I thought I fell in love, right? And it was, this whole thing, okay, I got a boyfriend and he actually likes me and all this stuff. And that actually took like me to a whole other area. And I think that's where I got really familiar with the Jamaicans, because he played soccer at the time. May his soul rest in peace. So it's like I was opening up to a world of all the Jamaicans where they're my friends now. And it's like, okay, we're gonna do this together. And moving forward, I think one of the things that managed to help me bring me up is the activities in school, because even in my last year when I became pregnant with Carmelisha, I had this support. And you were actually one of those people that never frowned on me, and I
Mhm.
remember that vividly. And then you went off to college. So when you went off to college, what did you manage to do? What was your area of expertise? What were your interests? How did you even transition?
So I went off to college, and I was going to continue in the law path. I wanted to be a lawyer. I was going to be a constitutional lawyer. All that moot court stuff was still like pumping in my veins. And I went off to college and had a great first semester. And at the end of my first semester, dun, 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 got pregnant with Ariel. So So, yeah, that second semester was rough, boy, because in them first months of pregnancy, you can't keep awake. So it was rough trying to get through the second semester of college pregnant. And then I took the fall semester off of 97 and then started Marquette in the spring semester of 98 because by then Ariel was born and everything. And I switched from history to focusing on political science because again, that just was just pumping in my veins. And then when I moved to a whole different state and I love Wisconsin now. I appreciate it as an adult. And it was
Mhm.
a completely different experience as a teenager. But then I decided to move back to New York because I was like, my mom shouldn't be taking care of me and a baby. And so I moved back to New York. Didn't finish college. And so that set me on a completely different path, a path of insecurity, a path of feeling shame. Like, oh my God, she did bright in school and she did go on the most, and now she have baby. She not have nothing to go on, like what kind of you even if no one was saying, you were projecting that because that's what you thought people were saying. And I
Right.
was like, yeah, I'm gonna finish school, I'm gonna go to Fordham, I'm gonna go to NYU because I was working at a job at the time. And so NYU was at the corner. And around graduation time, I was not happy because I was like, I don't have this degree. And I didn't appreciate then the experiences that I was having. So I moved back to New York. I had gotten a job as an office assistant at an interior design company. And I was learning so many things. Like, who would have thought to this day I could look at carpet and say, okay, the weft, the warp, I can tell, what mill, what type, like all these different things that I wouldn't have known. And the turning point for me was at the time, so now we're in 99. At the time they paid for me to go to this school that was called New Horizons, and it was a computer school. And back then it was, you're going to go, you're going to learn beginner, intermediate, advanced, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all these skills that people might have known minimal, but they were paying me to learn advanced computer skills. And this was like, whoa. I took those skills. I was tracking the royalties from my boss because she was a designer. So any design that she sold, she would have to get a commission. And I was tracking that with my brand new fancy Excel skills, V lookup, H lookup, hey. And I didn't see that I was growing in a way that wasn't traditional. And years later, someone said, hey, I know you're hung up about being a teenage mom and that you were in college and you didn't finish college, but I want you to recognize that your quest for education never left. You just had to find it different ways, and you didn't appreciate the way you found it because it wasn't like what your peers were doing. And it hit me. It hit me. He was like, you had to learn real fast. Agile learning. You learned on the job. You got jobs that they were like, you need a degree to have this job. And you got it because you had this skill already and you demonstrated a certain skill. And again, it was only a few years ago someone told me that, but I was just moving through with this chip on my shoulder and this maybe you can identify with this, Shamara. It's like you don't want to feel like you're ashamed of your child, because I'm not. My daughter is amazing and beautiful, but what society then types casts you as because you had a child at that age, it's
Yes.
just like you can't shake it. So there's this constant striving, not for myself. For a long time, it wasn't for myself, but I was going to prove to you that, yeah, so what? So what? So what? So what? So what? I'm doing this. So what? I could do this. What? You
Mhm.
listen, if you underestimate me, I'm coming for you. I'm like,
Mhm.
do not sleep on me because I was
Right.
going to prove to you. And a good chunk of my life was surviving. And my mom would remind me that I never tell you to drop out of school. But it was the path that I took because I felt like I needed to take the path. I saw that my mom was, like she had 4 kids, now a grandchild. And but in retrospect, it was a good move for me to make because it helped me to be the person that I am today. And I can empathize, with other people who may not be on the path that they thought for themselves, and they now have to have these detours. And like, let's make use of these detours. There's some hard lessons, beautiful lessons, but lessons that what the Bible said, like whatever God helps you through, it's not for you, it's for you
Mhm.
to help other people get through these emotions. So that was college, and then a whole bunch of career things happened after
You know, that you moved me because you really brought me back to a space where, yes, it was about survival. And it was also about being viewed as a failure from outsiders and
yeah.
even within family too.
Yep.
Because I come from, a family where my mother was a teenage parent, so and my grandmother a teenage parent. So there's like, oh, so you're following that path. Okay, you go on.
Mhm.
Who don't hear us feel,
Mhm.
right? So it's like you have this kind of mental you know, just this thought of not being good enough,
Mhm.
and this assumption that, oh, you're going to be on welfare, and the government is going to take care of you and your child, and you're just going to be this other person that is not going to amount to anything, right? So you're absolutely right. It is like you there's this extra oomph to want to do more, to prove to people that you are not a failure.
Mhm.
I'm not a failure. I
You're
am
not a disappointment,
not a disappointment.
Yes.
And that really shook me for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
And it's, it's to the point where now in my career, it's like I know my worth. I know it. I after, of course, having to go through a lot of rites of passage and self-reflections and all of this good stuff, you know, I realize what my worth is. And when people try to downplay or insult my intelligence, I really stand up because I know what I've gone through, the breakdown for the breakthrough,
Yeah.
right? So you really touched me with that. But then, as we grow, we figure out what we want and
Yeah.
we try. We were never afraid to try the next best thing if it means, growing and developing, right?
We didn't have a choice. We had a mouth to feed.
Yes.
Like you said, it was a survival. So we really had to make in the about, am I going to do this because rent for peer, babies, daycare, all of these other things had to be done. So our decisions from very early were made because we didn't have the luxury to decisions that weren't going to pan out. We were making decisions because there was a child to take care of and
Yes.
what was going to be in the best interest of that child. Oftentimes we didn't factor in. It was like, all right, me can do this. I could do this. And so I made some really tough decisions that I was ashamed. So
Mhm.
my first job, I finally landed in a law firm. Monty would be proud. Um, I finally landed at a law firm, and I said, I can't do this job as a paralegal in 2002. And I finally landed this job, and I was like, there is no way that I could do this job and really be good at it and have my
Mhm.
child. So I
Mhm.
had a conversation with my mom and I said, Mommy, can you take Ariel for 6 months? And then once I get settled in this job, I'll come back for her. I was so embarrassed. And when I was on the job, I didn't tell anyone I had a child because then they were going to ask, so, oh, wait, you're not bringing the child to the office. I didn't want to because I was ashamed that I had this child and couldn't take care of this child, even though she's with her grandmother. I was
Yes,
ashamed
right.
that I couldn't do this. But the goal was, as a paralegal, you're going to work that overtime and you're going to kill that overtime and really settle into this job and make a name for yourself at
Right.
this job, which I did. And then by the summer, I went and got her. She came back and, everyone was like, oh, but it was like shame, like little things, because you are judging yourself
Yes.
and you feel like what other people are judging you on. So deciding to take a job because I was like, who am I gonna trust with my daughter? Women that work overtime, mommy, like little things. And so that was just like one example of a decision that I had to make. And um I'm glad that I made that decision because, at the time my grandmother was living with my mom. My grandmother has passed away, but now I look at it like, oh, my daughter had the opportunity to grow up a little bit with my grandmother. So, we're just making decisions we're thinking is the best interest, and we're hoping that someday we'll fully realize and appreciate that we're making these decisions for the best interest of the child. And ultimately, as long as the pitney good, we good, that type
Exactly.
of
It's so funny that you're sharing your story because we have so much in common. Because that's it. It's as if I'm reading a book of my life,
thing.
and I appreciate you even sharing that. But then our grandmothers were also saying, "Look, we will help you out, but you need to go back to school.
Mm.
You need to do something with yourself, because okay, you have your child now. What are you going to do with your life next? And it seems as if you figured it out, right? So as you navigated the world, the world of being a paralegal or working with a firm, talk us through your experiences, and the things, that the pathway that you managed to choose that led to your career, and the breadth of skills that you have currently.
Well, so law firm path was just like, let's do this, let's work. And I was fortunate enough to be attached to this lawyer. I was I overheard them talking about me. So the lawyer comes up and he was like, yeah, I'm looking for a paralegal for a position. And the other lawyer, Karen, at the time, was like, yeah, the new paralegal, Carrie Ann, she's pretty good. And so Paul says, oh, okay, I'll take her on my project. And he was like, yeah, Karen says, so she's really a workhorse. And maybe somebody might say now in today's culture, be like, they shouldn't have said that. But I was like, at least somebody knows that I'm working my tush off on this job and they are recognizing it. I hitched my wagon to Paul, and it was just like up, up, up from there. Every project. And what was amazing, when I started the law firm at the time, I was the newest paralegal, but at the time there was this new technology that a lot of firms were resistant to. It was called litigation support e-discovery. It's now normal, where you have to use technology instead of going through boxes of data. Now a lot of that was now collected via computer and uploaded, and I mastered that bad boy so quick, Shamira. I became the expert.
Mm.
Every time someone was coming to sell us the software, Carrie Ann had to be in the room because I was going to question, can it do this? Can it do that? Nah, and I wasn't arrogant about it, but it was just like, okay, I'm owning this lane. I'm going to move with confidence in this lane. But not a lot of people knew I was Jamaican. I was just kind of
Mm.
going through. They would hear that I'm Jamaican when I'm on the phone talking to somebody. I told her to pick up the picnic, and someone's like, "Oh, what's that?" I heard an accent. Like, "Oh no," and I just kind of kept going, because also I wasn't very personal in the office. You didn't know much about me. So,
Mhm.
I have a child, and that's it. Because on Saturdays, when I had to work overtime or weekends, I was taking my child with me. So for a long time, all she thought my job was copying and highlighting, because that's all I was doing, right?
Goodness.
So, and back then when law firms had a lot of money, I take a car service to the office and car service back home. And so they, at minimum, they knew that, but no one really knew that I was a Jamaican. I didn't speak with any accent. I mastered that during moot court and mock trial. I mastered that. I had hiccups about that, but um, as I moved through and finally got to a position where I was managing 20 some odd paralegals, I was hiring for a part-time paralegal. And I remember the young man came into the office. You're asking questions, what's a strength and what's a weakness? And I was like, what's your weakness? And he said his accent. I almost fell out to the ground. I was like, what you mean your accent? He's like, yeah, I don't like my accent. And in that moment, it really hit me that I have this sense of privilege because I was able to go between. And I
Mhm.
was only able to go between because, and big up to everyone who was on that moot court team, 95 to 96. We had to go through this rigorous process. And I was so insecure because my accent was still thick. I just came up from Jamaica 2 years ago, so it was really thick. And I just remember Monty just being very confident, very confident. He was like, no, Carrie Ann, you are going to do this. Forget this. He was like, you're my Johnny Cochran. Like, this is what you're going to do. And I remember that. And that was a team of teams for real. And he just gave me like unwavering vote of confidence that you can do this. Yeah, okay, fine. You didn't have that accent or neutral thing, but you still are going to be good at this. You need to be here. And I recognize that this young man didn't have a Monty, didn't
Mm.
have a Mr. Daly who was like, Carrie Ann, we know which part, because Mr. Daly, what people didn't know at the time was Mr. Daly knew me personally because
Mhm.
he knew my mom and he's really good friends with my cousin and that generation. So if I'd see Mr. Daly in the hallway, he'd be like, Carrie Ann, you can't do that. No, watch nothing. Mr. Daly in his little way. And
Yes.
I had a bunch of teachers who were just very supportive. and they weren't focused so much on the neutrality of my voice. It was just what I was able to accomplish. And then I realized that this young man never had that.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have someone to say, you know what, young man, yes, you may have a thick accent, but don't focus on the accent. And I remember after the interview, I said, don't I would not recommend you say your accent is a weakness. I get it that you may want to improve on it and you may say certain things, but it's not a weakness. And I say that now, you know how much money they pay these actors to mimic a Caribbean accent? That accent ain't a weakness, it's a gold mine. It's just
It,
that they don't want to pay you that gold mine money for the accent, but it's a gold mine. And whenever someone says, "Oh, I like that you code switch," I was code switching or learning to code switch because of that moot court mock trial team. I
mm-hmm.
remember being on that team and they were like, well, there was a comment that was like, don't say ax. And I was like, I don't say ax, I said ask. Right. But,
Right.
it was learning to improve the diction. But still, at the end of the day, when we're done, we're going, drop us off, Anthony, Lisa, all of us are like, all right, we go back to the accent and all of that stuff. So it was being able to be this person for the firm that was sponsoring us at the time, and be this person when we were doing moot court and mock trial. But then after all of that is done, all that performance, I'm gonna chill out with the friends. We are going to party. Who are play chipping them up. Okay, we like it was that, but I didn't recognize that at 15, 16.
Right.
But it's become it's what I tell you, it's the privilege. It's privilege of going to Wingate and having amazing schoolmates like yourself, the privilege of being in Brooklyn, the privilege of being in New York, and using that privilege to help other people, just be their full selves.
You're absolutely right. And that's what I call conscious cultural communication. We've been so ashamed. And you're right, because growing up, I could not speak in my raw Crucian accent. I
Mhm.
just couldn't. It was not allowed in the household at all. Now, when I hear my uncle speak, I'm like, what are you saying? And when did you start talking like that? Because mommy would not like that in the house, right? But it's like we had to be proper. And you're absolutely right. At work, they heard my accent years later when I would talk on the phone with my family. And then my boss would come out of his office. He says, oh, I didn't know you spoke like that. It's like, yeah, that's my accent. And more, I felt comfortable talking with my accent in the
Yeah.
office because now people are hearing me code switch.
Yeah.
And I can't justify, it anymore. It's like I can't, not be true to myself. I needed to communicate effectively in the way that I know how, but then
Yeah.
understand there's a time and place to actually communicate in that way.
Yeah.
So when you talk about your daughter thinking that you did copies and highlighting, my daughter at the time, when I did take her to work on Saturdays as well to push those overtime hours, she thought I was a paper worker.
They're just like, oh, because you're just like, here, sit. And all they see is just the copies going you.
That was the
Collating.
paper worker. And I said, yes, I'm going to do paper worker today.
Little babies. They're like, oh, dear, dear.
But they're the reasons. They're
Yeah.
definitely one of the reasons why we are who we are today, right?
Yeah.
So as you navigated through the law firm and whatnot, you honed in on your skills. Did you move over to corporate for a little bit, or were you in law for a significant amount of
Oh
time?
my, I spent 15 years in the legal industry in a variety of roles.
Mhm.
And my last role in a law firm was in 2014. And that's kind of where I was feeling this. I was just feeling like something was missing. I didn't know what was next from a career standpoint. I did not want to go to law school. I had no intentions of going to law school. But at the same time, um, I felt like there was no one in they didn't have like now a lot of companies have very strong mentorship programs. There wasn't anything like that for non attorney staff. And so
Mhm.
I had to figure out what was next for me and I couldn't. And one of the struggles that I had, people were just like, yeah, you need to do this and socialize more. Now I know that. But our parents were like, go to work. Nobody get in the mix up at work. Just hold your head down and, get a paycheck and go home. And that was just not a recipe for success, especially in a law firm. So you had one and two lawyers who, they tried to get me out. They were successful in doing that. But guess what? And months after, they needed to find me, replace somebody, but they wouldn't call me back because, shame and a load, but it will broke neck, as we say. Like, you bit you cut off your own nose because
Yeah. Like,
I,
yeah.
like I wasn't going to, I mean, and I was there was an arrogance in that. I was like, when you were in listen, when you're in high school, I've been a paralegal. I know what I'm doing. I'm not here to kiss up to you. My job is to make sure in the role that I have is that we do not get any reprimand from a federal court because you didn't do this correctly. So if you thought I should talk to you nicely and pamper you, I'm like, oh no, because I will not be going in front of this magistrate judge and telling them why we didn't do this. This is not happening. But it also created an opportunity to say that there are many people of Caribbean heritage who are not thriving in the workplace because people don't get that since you've been a child, your parents tell you, go to work, stay far from people at work, don't mix up, and you will be fine. And that may have worked well for them, but in American work environment, that doesn't work. You need to socialize. Them I got happy hour. Me, I don't have time for happy hour. I need to go home to this picnic.
Mhm,
Like all
mhm.
these other things that now they're conversations that instead of a happy hour, let's do like a tea something because not everyone drinks,
Right.
or all these other things. And why do you want to wait till the end of the day? You have women who need to go home to kids. Now men who need to go home to kids. But back then it was a hindrance. And then when I tried to get support from other people of color, they didn't really get it, especially if they didn't have a Caribbean culture to understand where I was coming from. And so I started the podcast because I felt like everybody had that issue. Like, listen, this is what's going on in the workplace. I don't like it. I don't want to, don't force me to socialize or have play dates. That's how I thought about it. And that view has evolved because I recognize the analogy that I use is football. So you have American football or what we call in the Caribbean football, which is soccer. So you
Right.
call them football, but it's not the same game. It's two different games.
Very
So
different.
which football are you playing? And you can't play Caribbean football soccer rules on an American football field. So if since I'm in America, you better play the American game. And culturally, we're like, me no want to be fake, the fake business, me real, like my bill's real too. So it's just gonna keep moving in the direction that I need to go. Adjust. You know,
Right.
no one said I needed to open my door and tell them about XYZ and blah, blah, blah. But I needed to be able to navigate. So then I started to talk about scandal. And then I started to talk about little things in the office. And then I had mastered it. So by the time I went to the job after the law firm job in 2015, it went from, oh, Carrie is mean. Carrie Ann is mean. I was like, I didn't do anything to this woman for she's a mean. Like this is my resting face. Like not mean, and if I don't see you, like if you're worried that I'm mean, you did something that me, would think that you're mean. So by the time I got to the other job, I was, oh my God, Carrie, you're so charming. Cause I was just like, hey, just going through because now I was able to recognize that there are parts of myself I could share with my coworkers. And so it worked out that um, I was one of the last project managers to be hired. They had a reduction in force. So I was one let go, but they called me back because they knew I had a podcast and a blog and they were like, come back, we have a role in the marketing department. And that's how I figured that, yeah, you could leverage this because I'm building deeper networks in the company. So, okay, they had to do this reduction in force. Carrie Ann, it wasn't personal. It was just numbers,
Right.
but ring, ring, ring. We have a position in marketing. You want to take it? Absolutely. And so, it's what do you call it? It's negotiating between what you think you should be doing based on the old learning that our parents gave us versus what is our reality right
Yes.
now. And the
Right.
reality right now is that you ain't gonna go far if you don't have deep connections in your workplace, in your industry, or whatever.
Exactly. And it's interesting, and this is a perfect transition to your podcast, Carry On Friends. You've done well over 100 and look, close to 200, episodes, right? Podcast episodes, where you talk about immigration, preserving Caribbean culture, careers, business, finance, life balance, parenting, building connections, so much more. What really prompted you to say, okay, I'm going to go forth with this, even if it's at a time when no one else is really doing it? What really propelled you in that direction?
Listen, I don't know what it was. Y- I I'm gonna go back to um how I was brought up, and maybe a little bit of Wingate, and how that just kind of moved me, because initially I wanted to start a podcast in 2013. No lies, it was 2012, because I started listening to like um religious podcast, right, on the train to work. And I was like, oh, I want to do this, but I was scared. I was, when I said scared, scared, you know what? I want to say Busby, because that's what we used to call you in high
Oh, yes,
school.
you could say it, please, please. I would be insulted if you don't call me Busby.
you know, um, that's kind of, what I wanted to do, but I was scared. And what I did was, my brother-in-law and we all have like a great relationship. And I was like, I want to do this. So we came up with this strategy, and he was like, okay, so what we're gonna do, you're gonna volunteer on the paralegal management, magazine. You're gonna volunteer at church. I used to do the voiceovers at church, and it was kind of practicing this voice. And so I started a blog instead, because I was like, I'm not ready for the podcast. And at that time, I was still cringing hearing my voice. It was like, "Ugh, this is horrible." And I did that. And through the blog, I did a survey, and they were like, well, I asked, what do you want to hear? And they were like, well, I want to hear more people about me, like people like me. And I was like, boy, that gonna be rough to write, because that's a lot of writing. And, in my mind at the time, I was still struggling or reconciling that my blog is not going to be like the gossip blogs that have a bajillion articles every day. It's one post a week is enough. And when I saw that survey in 2014, I was like, okay, I have to launch the podcast. And so I launched the podcast January 2015. And as with everything, you're going into your network. So my first couple guests, I was calling up my friends. I need a guest for the podcast. Okay, you can't interview Andrew, you can't interview Nadia, you can interview this. And I was not sure what I was doing. I was like, nobody gonna listen to this. And if you listen to the earlier versions of the podcast, I still wasn't being true to myself, because it sounded like, you're listening to Carry On Friends, the Caribbean American podcast. Now it's like, hello everybody, welcome to the, it's the transition of doing this 7+ years at this point. But it was just like, I know there's a need, and I know people want to hear it. And I think the turning point there was one day I was like, I don't have a topic to talk about. I don't know what I'm going to talk about. But since I'm committed to recording one podcast every 2 weeks, I recorded an episode, and I told the audience, like, listen, I committed to doing this recording, but I really don't want to talk about nothing, because I don't have a topic. I waited until the last minute, and I thought a topic would come to me, and one didn't come to me. So it is what it is. Here's the recording. That episode was 8 minutes. I thought my podcast career was going to be done. Then somebody sent me a message. So tell me, oh, you actually get to record it, since you didn't want to record it. I was like, oh, okay. Like, so they wanted to know, like, we get it. You didn't want to record the episode. I hear it in your voice, but you still did it anyway. How? And I just kind of talked through that process. I was like, I made a commitment. Like, it's a funny thing when I promise you. So for instance, perfect example. I told you, like, streaming on Facebook. I don't even go on Facebook to save my life, but I promised you I'm gonna do it. So I'm gonna show up.
Yes.
When we make promises to other people, we will show up, and we won't necessarily do that for ourselves. And that was like, yeah, I showed up because I made a promise, whether it's one person listening or two. I said every 2 weeks there was going to be an episode, and that's why I did it. And there's a lot of things we don't want to do, but we've committed to somebody else. And that's why accountability is such a good thing, because we will, like, babe, I want to lose weight, I need to run. Trying to do that on my own, that will not happen.
Right.
If I promise, with Shelly Ann Fraser around this track, it's just, so it's really the audience accountability to continue and to do this. It's not me, saying, yeah, I have this power. It was just really a commitment to the audience that I was going to do this. And more so because at the time I recognized that there were things that we're talking about that no other podcast was really talking about it. And people were like, yeah, I need it. And so as I got more comfortable and started going into the accents and saying little things that Caribbean people would understand, then I was like, okay, this is home. But there was a period where I was going to quit the podcast because people were like, I make no money. Caribbean people aren't checking for you. And I had to, and around that time, my grandparents had passed away. There was a lot of death. I was pregnant. Oh my gosh. Like I was
Mm,
living Edwige Handicap book where, you're pregnant and people
mm,
dying. Like
mm,
this is a mix of emotions.
mhm.
And I remember asking myself, um, if I weren't going to make money from doing this podcast or this blog, would you want to do it? And I'm like, absolutely. I mean, you don't get to chat on moot court and mock trial and not, so that was the turning point where I was like, okay, I am fully committed. I'm digging my heels into this and I just have to roll with the punches with anything. There's going to be good days, there's going to be creative days and not so creative days, and just kind of follow along with that. So that's
And
how I've
here
been
we
doing
are.
this.
We
Huh?
got carry on, friends,
Yes,
right?
yes. I try to be as honest as possible about some of the experiences. So like when my grandmother passed away,
Mm,
there was this episode, like my voice was cracking because I was about to cry.
you
And I
know.
remember I didn't want to record the episode. And the guy that I was talking to, well, we were part of a network, and he said, Carrie Ann, you got to record that because maybe not everyone is experiencing a loss right now, but people eventually will. And, like you can't just be recording stuff and people don't know that you had like this huge thing happen. And
Right.
so I kind of did that. And it was just like, people are like, oh, wow, that's crazy. Or, this is exactly what happened when, my father died or something. And it became a place where we then had to deal with some of the things that Caribbean people do when somebody dies. So,
Mhm,
as I told you, my father recently passed, and
mhm.
Tuesday's episode, I'm talking with my friend about that experience. And, why Caribbean people say, oh, they're in a better place. I never ask you if you're in a better place. You know, me not in a better place. And I mean, emotionally, intellectually, I get that she's a Christian, but in my moment of like grief, like Amanda just said, miss, I still have not gotten over my grandmother's passing. Last year for my a family member's funeral, so it was streaming on YouTube. Somebody said it was appointed for man to die. It was like, how this coming right now? How is that comforting us in this moment? You
Right.
know? And again, addressing some of those things. And also, what the podcast has allowed me to do is also check myself in
Yes.
terms of how I speak to other people, because I could have committed those same felonies to other people too. So
Right.
it's not until you are really self-aware about what you're going through and how you may have committed a similar sin that you now have to talk about it, address it, apologize for anybody I said, like, you know sorry for your loss. They're in a better place. God don't give you more than what you can handle. I'm handling a lot, you
Mm,
know?
mhm.
So just kind of using the podcast to share some of the personal stuff and what I know an audience member can relate to, and tie that into how we deal with things culturally and how it may not be so healthy or may be healthy for
Right.
us in a way. So talking about all them stuff on the podcast, but
I know you are, and you're doing a phenomenal job. I know that you have a short time with us today, but let me tell you,
I think I have a little bit more time. I sorted
you
out
do
the
so
hiccup. The
good.
hiccup.
I love to hear it. You know, it's just oh my gosh, the podcast, it gives me flavor.
Thank you.
And when I noticed that you were working with I Am Caribbean in its first launch,
Mhm.
I was so happy to see that Caribbean culture finally has a place where people aren't looking down on the culture as a whole. There are so many wonderful things that come out of its richness. And by living in Brooklyn alone, you
Mhm.
can see, not just because of the West Indian Day Parade, you just realize that there is a whole vibe
Mhm.
that for too long, far too long, we've managed to suppress it because of the shame, the worry, the targets. the Snickers, the things that come that people don't realize can be offensive and hurtful.
Yeah.
When you came out with talking about it while having those subtle undertones of your accent, I was here. I am still here for it. Because even now, you're talking about your family, the deaths that had happened in your family, you still have a sense of humor with it. You had me cackling a moment ago because that's what people want to really feel. Also,
Right.
they want to feel, yes, in a space of sorrow, but then for someone to uplift them with just a little hint of a joke, to get them through whatever, because it's like they'll think about it, but not really express it in the way that you do in your conscious communication, for the culture. So I'm wondering what is in store for Carrie. I know, there are peaks and pitfalls and that you wanted to quit at some point, but you're thriving
Oh,
in
thank
the
you.
podcast industry. I mean, you're masterful. You have a course coming up on how to teach folks how to do their own podcast. Tell me what's in store for, Carry On Friends, and talk a little bit about your new venture, Breadfruit Media.
Oh, wow. Thank you for that. My husband keeps telling me that I'm funny, and I'm like, I'm gonna take my funny minutes. I say exactly how I feel, but thank you for that. What's in store for Carry On Friends? It's I want to go back to something you said. We did an audience survey. We do this every year with the audience to hear where they are. And it really came out in a very emotional session that there were people who didn't know, especially those. So we were immigrants. We came here, but those born here, particularly, they struggle with certain elements of the culture. And that's because their parents didn't tell them or immerse them in the culture. We had that luxury because we were born there. We know if we run up and down barefoot and do the most and all of that stuff. And it really came out that your parents, especially to my Haitian audience members, because they had to bear the worst of it, right? And it wasn't for lack of not wanting to teach them the culture, it was for survival. They
Yes.
didn't want you. It was also why it's the early root of why you don't socialize at work, because if you socialize, you would hear the accent or something like that. And they did not want to be ridiculed, possibly lose their job or whatever other negative connotation, and reconciling that generational trauma or appreciating that, oh, wow, this is what my grandparents were dealing with when they came to the US, etc. This is what uncle was dealing with or mommy was dealing with. And when you have that realization, it's a very different emotional thing that you could get to a place of forgiveness, because they weren't doing it because they were ashamed. They were doing it for the sheer strength of survival, which
Mhm.
is really the immigrant experience. It's
Yeah.
surviving at any given point. Somebody might think you're illegal. I have my green card. How you think I illegal? Because you hear an accent or something like this, the assumptions that you make. So and then what's next for Carry On Friends? I'm just rolling with the punches, looking for great guests to have a lot of amazing conversations, and hopefully doing something in person now that outer door kind of open up. I still wear my mask, by the way, but interacting more with people now that COVID not so turn up to 10, maybe 5, but and then Breadfruit Media. Oh my goodness, Breadfruit Media was a creative outlet because um at the point when I wanted to quit Carry On Friends, I wanted to do other things. And so it's the platform that I use to produce other shows that I enjoy working with people to produce those shows. And it's also where I'm like teaching podcast stuff. We're gonna see if it work out. Because the thing about being an entrepreneur is that you're learning, you're pivoting, you're trying it, you quit and then you move forward or something, which is another struggle that we have as Caribbean people. Like, failure is not a choice. But as an entrepreneur, you have to shift that mindset that failure is a choice,
Mhm.
because without the failure, I can't iterate, I can't pivot. And I can say that boldly, like, failure is a choice. But when that Caribbean thing sets in, it can't fail, it can't fail, it can't fail.
This cannot fail.
It have it work. But it's balancing the DNA of culture, because that's what it is. You can't get rid of it, right? but
Right.
we can see the beauty of it in our kids, right? So I see Aria doing big things with our, her natural skincare things. Like she's already ahead. When my kids talk to me, I'm like, if when I was your age, you did talk to me, so are you, you wouldn't live to, but you realize that, okay, you have a leg up to communicate and speak
Yes.
how you feel. And so
Yes.
we'll give you that. Me usher that into you. But me and my husband turn and say, so this pitney just talk to me. I'm good.
Yes.
I'm good.
Yes. Yes.
The other day, the 4-year-old, my husband said something to me. I said, Daddy, why you have to be so mean? My husband said, when call me mean? I said, you know but in one sense, you think of like you couldn't do that, but in another sense, you're enjoying that they're able to express themselves, because
Yes.
we didn't get that opportunity to express ourselves.
Right.
And so that impacts us because we deal with a lot of anger and internalized things.
Mm-hmm.
So through the podcast, trying to have more of those conversations, recognizing that we are grooming another generation and how we're going to let this culture still survive generation to generation. And then with Breadfruit Media, just looking to flex more creatively over that side, do some other projects. I don't know how it's worked because I still work full time. I
Right.
still go into an office.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not go into an office, but I still have a job. So it's really um realizing the fullness of my capabilities. And it's still with that thing, like I didn't have a degree, so I gotta work extra harder for this
Right.
thing, but I'm smarter than the average beer. But
Right.
without the degree, people
Okay,
won't
Yogi.
notice. So it's really like getting to this place where it's just like, okay, joke with myself about the serious things and add some levity to the moment, because with our culture is there's two sides to every coin. So they will say we laugh everything off, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
way that our ancestors they dealt with whatever
Oh,
they had. So how we cope, right? So we do a little bit. So I'm not dismissing it completely that, all right, this is going to be a challenge, but I could ha 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 through it, a little bit.
mhm, mhm.
So the course is out, trying to create more shows, and still going on with Carry On Friends and selling t-shirts and
Yes.
just doing all the things to also set an example. So when the kids ready to start some business venture, right now my kids want dance, Ethan want dance. I'm in the dancing business. We're not going YouTube and have YouTube through the house and not show him how to, he's ding dong, like bling, like all of that. And you wouldn't be surprised because I was the dancer in high school. So it's not a
Right.
surprise that he's a dancer.
Right.
So but just setting an example for them to say, oh, mommy was doing this, I could do it too. And it's cute.
It
And
is.
getting him to do voiceover stuff. So maybe do a kids podcast or something. I don't know. I'm just
I
looking
like
to,
that.
stretch
I'm
the
digging
creative
it.
muscle.
I'm,
Yeah.
I'm digging it because they're so in tune with digital media and whatnot. They just know. I mean, although I have to say that while kids and children, I would say, have access to devices, that doesn't necessarily mean that they know how to work through the nuances of it. And because of course with what all the technology that is at the forefront, it's all doing it for you rather than you understanding how to do it behind the scenes. And I know when I started off, like particularly when I went to City Tech, we had a whole coding class, and in order for me to build my e-portfolio, I needed to know coding in order to make it appear the way how it did in the end.
Right.
And that was missing with the plug and plays that came in store. And while it does make it much easier, I still realize that while children are on Snapchat, TikTok and all of that, they don't necessarily know how to type. They don't necessarily know how to navigate the Excel, the Word, the PowerPoint, the Access.
Wow.
It's foreign, it's uncharted territory for them. So just to help them to really understand and balance both in technology so that they can be wholesome, that's really something that's important moving forward.
I remember during the early days of the pandemic, and there was something that he had to do, and I said, "We're gonna open up Excel and do this." He was like, "What?" I was like, "Let's open Excel. You're gonna learn today. You're gonna learn today."
It's like a punishment.
But again, with digital, everything being digital, there's some skills that then soft skills, they talk about the soft skills
Yes.
that we
Yes.
need to improve on or need to be worked on, because now everyone texts, so they don't understand um empathy or emotions or
Mhm.
how to communicate. Like, I mean, I'm like this, but I'm really still awkward. I'm an introvert, so don't look at me that do the most on here. So I'm still an introvert, I'm quiet. But because kids are mostly communicating via computers, they don't have that skill yet to understand that I'm looking at your face,
Mhm.
reading body language and
Mhm.
cues and all of that. They don't have that. And then they're also very self-conscious because they don't know how to really talk to people in person. So that awkwardness when we were young is like a million times for them because they're not always interacting with people. And then worse with the pandemic when everybody was east and west. I think figuring out how as parents to kind of bridge that for them, because as you said, that episode we talked about before we went live, that intentional parenting and the iPad a babysit them, we just like and just do the work. So now we have to be more intentional about,
Yes.
okay, less iPad time, let's talk about what, mommy. Like,
Stimulate them
yes. So
verbally.
right, right. But doing the podcast has also allowed me to see where the trends are coming down the line and what I can do to kind of intercept some of that for
Mhm.
them. It's great that they're going to know how to use TikTok before I do. It's great. It's
Right.
marvelous. But we're also going to learn, Ethan, why did you let the bag fall? And why did you throw out the stuff like that? And he's upset and he's huffing and puffing. And I'm like, I'm gonna ask you again, why? Till he
Mhm.
gets to a point where he can articulate himself.
Right.
Because that is, and then because you're black and brown kids, they go say like, oh, him have an anger problem. Blah, blah.
Mhm.
He don't have an anger problem. Him just been on the computer most of the time.
Mhm.
We all have that IT person that nobody wants to talk to because he don't
Exactly.
have nothing. I said the IT person only been talking to the computer all day, every day for the whole week, so he don't really know
How
how
to
to
interact with
how
other
to
people.
interact with people.
Mhm.
So that's really you're gonna have, that very example. Everyone has an IT person that just not have no about them.
Most IT people aren't personable. No.
And that's why, so if you see that, you know that's where our kids could be if they don't have that right interaction on how to communicate with others without that frustration. So yeah, I don't know how we end up here, but I like it.
Yeah, I'm gonna like it too. Amanda's daughter would love to start a podcast. I didn't know Amanda when I interviewed Amanda. Her daughter also wanted to become this rising YouTuber. So I mean, it is possible, but we have to just teach them the right way to
Way.
navigate it, and also help them to manage expectations. Because Amanda, you're right. The world is not a nice one. There can be cruel. And if we were to really use an analogy of when we went to high school where people weren't nice to us either, it's a similar approach, but we have to help them develop the tough skin to kind of like let the water beads roll off the shoulder and not allow them to really take on, you know, those negativity.
One of the reasons why I'm really hesitant about my son getting into content creation for public consumption is my own issues of creating content. And
Mhm.
now that there's, no matter what I'm saying, like, you have all these thinkers, don't compare yourself. We all compare with self, period. So as an adult, if I have to constantly wrestle with, I can't compare myself to this other podcast. I don't know if children are of that mature mind to be able to not compare, wonder why they're not doing as well, why this person, I mean, they already said, mommy, why I get more him get more candy than me, right? You can
Right.
imagine this on a larger scale. And a lot of times I had to step back and it's like, you know what, this is like my friend Michaela said, this is industry stuff. So if
Mhm.
the audience like it, don't focus on industry stuff about who's doing better. You have an audience.
Right.
And that is not always easy, especially when life is hard and stuff is happening. Like, why about a podcast? I not have a big audience, or I don't have this. You struggle with comparison every
Yes.
day, every week, whatever. And that's a much harder lift for kids who want to do it for fun, but very soon they're going to be compared to another kid creator. And that's a tough thing to manage as a parent, because
Right.
what you say, like, oh, it's because you're my mom, you're telling me this. Well, but say if me not tell you as your mother, who go tell you? So,
Right.
so that is the biggest concern about the content creation. It's the and we've seen a lot of studies about the impact of Instagram and all this stuff on kids, and that is a big concern for me. That's why I
Absolutely.
like podcasts, because I know I'm in the video podcast. All you're hearing is my voice. You know, add video to it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, me like your background, like oh, the background bashy. Oh, I need to get a bashy background, and I need this light. That's why I have so much tech, because I'm like, I need a good light. All this pressure. Oh
Yes,
gosh.
yes, yes, yes. I kind of just run with it. I'm like, wherever it goes. And honestly, I have to tell everyone, Carrie has been my inspiration to even start this. Carrie and I, we communicated and everything else before podcasting. And then this came about, and I knew when you were starting it, at one point I wanted to start, and I still do want to do the podcast. But the pandemic really helped me to say, okay, Shamira, you can carve out the time to do this. Because when I spoke to you, I said, I don't know if I'll have the time, but I really want to launch. And you interviewed me
Mhm.
on to make sure that my content or my concept made sense. So you are definitely an inspiration for me. I just took a different route with trying to live stream to see how it would pan out.
I said stick with the live stream. You
But
podcast and YouTube is a thing. So, they're trying to pay people to do their podcast on YouTube. So,
right. So maybe I'm ahead of something, but I
yeah.
just wanted to plug that you have been such a source for me behind the scenes, and even just to pick up the phone and text you, say, hey, you have a moment, and to call you. It may have not been often, but it was impactful.
Yeah. Oh,
And then you've always been an eye, just to give you your flowers, on here. You were also very in tune to what my children were doing. And I can't thank you enough for actually giving us the opportunity to nominate one for an opportunity when Carmelisha got that Caribbean award, and we had to
yeah.
go to DC to meet with the ambassadors and whatnot.
I said,
So
apply, apply.
you were on it. You said, make sure, and but you took your hands out of it, but at the same time, the process just moved forward. And that also propelled her to think about, when in her marketing and her media and whatnot, she was able to think broadly after that experience. Because we went to DC for the weekend, and it was just like this pomp and circumstance, but we got to meet with the ambassadors, and
Miss
uh,
Nelson, Dr.
yes,
Nelson.
the folks from Bahamas, the government officials. I mean, quite a number of people, and also nominees and awardees who are doing such phenomenal things in that space. So I just want to thank you again for always just paying attention as a silent star,
Yeah.
and really pointing out talent in the best way you can, and pushing folks in a direction where you think you can see them standing on a platform that is thriving and really beautiful. So
She can, she's been doing it. She's been the
yeah,
star like a
yeah,
daddy was, like, the personality. I mean, you
yeah,
both
so
had it, but it's again, this is how the village grows. Like,
yeah,
how are we gonna groom each other?
yeah,
How do we groom the next, like this is what we grew up with. Like everybody tell the story,
yeah,
like I couldn't go down the road and the neighbor don't, bust upon me that I went down the road. But
right.
in the same way, if my neighbor's kids is doing great, this little boy doing good, let's
Mhm.
celebrate that they're doing good. And I really think that what Carmelisha was doing at the time, and hopefully she figures out how to navigate back to that in a really great way, is being that next generation of Caribbean Caribbean American digital content creation that gives different eyes,
Mhm.
through the podcast. People don't talk about the US Virgin Islands because it's the US Virgin Islands, but technically it's in the Caribbean, and that's a
Yes.
different layer, and then she has this really sweet spot of USVI heritage and Jamaican, so she can really go which way she want to go with this.
She can
And
definitely.
but again, just the beauty of creating an opportunity for people to know more about the culture that they don't know other than Bob Marley, weed, beach, and sea, so Like, come on, people, we're more than that. Or when they see me, they go, "No, all right,
Right.
okay." Just one more thing, or is Sean Paul really Jimmy? Like, really? Is that what you're going to ask me? But it's a really, I love that what she was doing, and we're gonna always celebrate our kids. You know,
All the way. And I know Ariel, she's into her art and whatnot. So
Ariel
clearly,
into, Ariel is beat Ariel. Ariel is like, listen, why do we have to pay this? She's gonna be a money person. She's like,
yes.
I don't want to pay for this. Like, this is
Mhm.
too much money. I'm like,
Right. Which sounds kind of like her mom. Kind
but
of.
she's, I'm extremely proud of her, being able to accomplish things that I wasn't able to accomplish, to see her travel the world and be like,
And stand up for herself.
yes. I'm really proud and just happy, and how much of a big sister. So when I tell people the spread, they're like, how many kids you have? I said, well, I have an adult and two kids. And I was like, yeah, one is 24, one is almost 10, and one is 4. Oh, wow. I'm just like, That's
Right. And then they have this assumption, well, how many baby daddies do you have? I've gotten that. I'm like, you are so disrespectful.
yeah, you're just like, hey, black don't crack. But it's again just looking at her and the lessons learned, being young moms and surviving and thriving, and now here to laugh about the experience, and looking at our other friends, go
Yes.
through
Yes.
motherhood, and when we were going through things, they couldn't relate to us because we like down the mile. And we said this, you know, and now to see them and be a support to them, like, yeah, she going through the teenage years. Child, I remember it so well. It was traumatic. You look at your face. It was traumatic. I was like, they're there.
Well, Anthony says Carrie was my high school crush. Confessions time.
I know. Anthony was always like, what did she see in that other boy? I'm well, but you know what? This is the beauty about Wingate, because there was so many assumptions, but Anthony was always well dressed.
Yes.
And it was
Yes.
just like, if you ain't coming correct like Anthony, well dressed, like but it's just that level of maturity. And Anthony was like, well, and he had this speaky, spooky
Yeah,
thing,
he
but I
never
know
spoke
Anthony was
that
like, I
bad
don't.
Guyanese. He never did the GT accent.
He's
He
like,
was
no,
very smooth with it, always.
listen. And
Mm,
Anthony was GQ before everyone was talking GQ. That
for
is
real.
his bottom line.
For real.
Big up Chris.
Chris,
But
what's up? Another
Anthony
people.
Anthony really gave me. I do not know why Carrie Ann likes this boy. He's nothing like me. He didn't say that, but he gave this. I am of such elevated elegance. You know,
We talked about that when I interviewed him a few weeks ago.
that's an Anthony vibe. Like, Anthony gave me that vibe. So it
Still
would
got the vibe.
listen. It was so in the car service from the law firm. It was me, Anthony, and Lisa. And Anthony was just always just all together, and it was just like, he's a classic man. Like, I don't got time for this. This is
I'm a
kid stuff.
classic man. Yep.
It's kid stuff. So anything Anthony does fashionable, I'm just like, I'm not surprised. This was always Anthony.
Yep. 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 Oh my God, this has been such a pleasure.
Yeah, it was
I
good catching
appreciate
up.
you carving out the time
Mhm.
to be here on Goal Intentions, Carrie. Oh my God. And clearly everyone is so happy to see you,
Oh,
you
it's
know.
good to see everybody. I'm not really on Facebook a lot. I just like sometimes feel overwhelmed by Facebook,
Yeah, yeah,
but every once in a while I'll drop in and hail up everybody.
yes. I
I
noticed
remember
that.
Chris too, like the moot court mock trial, the parties, the everything was just great. It's
Yeah.
great memories for me.
Absolutely. And that this is why I think I continue, not I think I continue to do this because there are so many special moments. And I really, it's important that we, talk about it
Yeah.
because I don't think there was a gap because we left high school, lost touch, reconnected. and then life happened all in the in-betweens, and we never got the opportunity to really talk about it. And it's to the point where I'm telling my children about the stories, and I seem like an old fart because they're like, you can't possibly be down like that. And I'm like, you have no idea.
We had the best parties. We had the best parties. Like, we had the best parties. We had the most amazing experience. We we went to Disney on the Amtrak. We just did a lot of amazing things. And I have really good memories. There's probably one bad memory, but I made it funny.
Mhm.
Where within the first week of there, somebody teeth my Jansport. This
Oh,
tall guy, this little one, he was like, "Give me a Jansport," but I'm like, "My book's in my bag," like a little nerd. But my book's in my bag, and he was like, "Give me the bag." And then my uncles come like, "Where you see the boy? Where went there? Where went there?" It's just like he been gone. Like, I don't know. But that was probably one of the more negative experience, but I have really good experiences about Wingate. The teachers, Miss
yes,
Sylvester, the
yes.
math teacher, she was just like, "Come on, girl, come on, come on."
Was me.
Just and the other day my brother was like, he hated going to Wingate because he was my younger brother. All the teachers had this expectation, and they were like, "You are nothing like your sister." He was just like, you know but and also I used to tell people, like, after 9/11, they stepped up security, but we've been going through this to security at Wingate. We had to step on a mat. We had to punch our IDs. I'm like, it was a full on security thing that in retrospect, I'm like, we shouldn't have gone through that, but that was our experience.
Exactly.
So, and I tell my husband, he's like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, then one we down, we have to step on the metal detector mat, and we had to put our bag through the x-ray machine." He was like, "What?" I was like,
Yep.
"Yep, that
Yep.
was school."
Was Wingate. That was Wingate. I used to appreciate when we punched our ID cards, although they were laminates. It used to say "Happy Birthday" on your birthday.
I
I was
didn't
like,
pay attention to it. All I
yeah.
wanted to just make sure it didn't go another color other than green and just go through the door. That was it. I didn't care about anything else, but the experience was great. The opportunities moot court mock trial afforded, the friendships, the conversation, just seeing some of the comments. I think that's just amazing. And being able to have friends in other countries. I think the last time we all linked up was when Junior George had the boat ride.
Boat ride.
Yes.
Junior George, we need another Wingate reunion, please.
Yes.
Yeah,
He's a
you
party
focus
guy.
on Grenada right now and Grenada Carnival, but we really need you to pull up and let's do this Wingate
Let's do
reunion
it
one.
again. Yeah. 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 It was great. It was great.
Well, thank you so much, Carrie. For everyone out there, thank you so much for tuning in and always commenting, always sharing. I truly appreciate every one of you for tuning in on a Saturday. Have a wonderful and purpose-filled Saturday afternoon. Take good care, everyone.
Bye.